Hey everybody, welcome back to Tuesday. Welcome back to Tuesday. This doesn't make any sense. But welcome back to the Untapped Virtual Happy Hour. I'm your host, Greg Avola, founder of Untapped. I'm super excited to be here today. And today we're talking about beer photography, an amazing piece of what makes beer awesome. And I'm happy to bring on my guest today, Paul Shim. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me. I am a big fan of the show, and I've been watching all your great guests, so I'm just thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, before we get on the goodness about beer, photography, and how to take the best shots, because we can't give all the secrets away, you're going to have to do some work yourself. Let's drink a beer. And Paul has been kind enough to send me some of beer from his area in Rochester. So I guess we'll both tell each other what we're drinking. Why don't you start? I'll hold up the picture here. We both got this amazing beer. What is this beer we're drinking?
Yeah, so this is from Rohrbach Brewing Company. It's called Fuzzy, and it's a peach New England style double IPA.
Awesome. Well, let's crack it open. If you're out there right now, make sure you crack it open, your beer, and check in on Untapped. Make sure you use the Untapped at Home venue so you can tell what you're being safe out there with everything that's going on, as well as seeing what all the friends are drinking. I can instantly smell the peaches here when I'm pouring it. So as we shore it up, cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching. Cheers. We appreciate you checking us out. Wow. You know, most of the time when you have a beer like this, which is completely can't see through it at all, you kind of don't expect the peaches to be so taste buds there. And this has definitely got that peach on there, but not too much where it becomes undrinkable. It's definitely a really good beer.
Yeah, it's really subtle, but it adds a nice sweetness to that hazy IPA that already is there. I think this beer was released last week, so it's pretty recent.
Nice.
And it's just a great beer for this weather that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. It's seems like it's hotter than ever. But so now we're moving on to a little bit about you. Obviously, Paul, people have not heard of you. Tell us a little about your background and what you do in the world of photography.
Sure. So I am a beer photographer based out of Rochester, New York. I actually moved here about a year ago. So before that, I was based in Connecticut. So I know the Connecticut beer scene really well. I've been living with a camera in my hand basically since high school. I mean, we were just talking before the show. I bought my first camera, the Nikon D80 in 2008. And ever since then, I've just been taking pictures, shooting videos here and there. And recently it's been all about beer and beer photography.
Awesome. Well, I think that's becoming a hot topic. Talking to a lot of people in the industry now is you follow them on Instagram. You know, there are a lot of players out there that breweries that use really clean photography. When did it kind of move into the perception from you to kind of focus on beer? Obviously, being in beer, you like beer for a long time. When did that move into the photography world and say, hey, I'm going to start taking these elaborate pictures of beer in different settings?
That's a great question. You know, I think one day I was just scrolling through Instagram and seeing all these great people like Craft Beer Deer, Ellie Trax, Corey Smith. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do something like that. I think I can make something that's pleasing to look at. I'm just going to try my hand at it. I'm going to give it a go. And that was two or 3 years ago, and I haven't looked back since.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, if you're out there right now, what we want to do is want to encourage you to check in your beer. Obviously, we talked about before, but one of the best parts about checking in a beer is the photo. We always have it on tap. I've definitely dabbled in this area. I know you have, as Paul as well, of checking the best pictures you can. So if you're out there now, we want to make sure you check in your beer with the hashtag. And I lost my notes here on the hashtag thing. So what is the hashtag we're going to do? It's going to be check-in game strong. You see at the bottom scrolling here on there. So make sure you check in your beer, add that as your hashtag, and then share on your social networks. We want to share on Instagram and other networks as well. We want to see your best beer shots. See if you can beat Paul on the best shots out there when it comes to the beer itself. But let's show a few of the shots that you've taken recently on your Instagram page and kind of walk through some of the setup that you've wanted to go through from the vision. So here's one you took of Festina Pesh here, which honestly – I'm super excited that it's back because this is one of my favorite summer beers from Dogfish Head. How did this kind of come together and how do you kind of set yourself up for success for these photos here?
That's a great question. Honestly, I just go into my fridge, see what beer I have, and then look around my house or outside and see what I want to do. So this one was literally like 2 or 3 hours ago.
For real time here.
Yeah, seriously. My wife assisted me because I mean, I can set up my tripod and do a little remote thing with my phone. It's just easier to have another person. So my wife helped me out, and I knew I wanted to feature this beer because it's sort of been on hiatus for a while. I mean, it was in bottles before, and then it went away for a while, and now it's back in a can in this variety pack. So that's what I wanted to kind of feature. And that was the creative decision behind, blurring out the background with that nice bokeh and just having the can right there in the front center.
Very cool. Let's go to your next one here. This one's really cool. I love the bokeh in the background of blurring out with the lights coming in, obviously pouring it here. So walk us through how you're going to set this one up from that perspective.
Yeah, so this one's really interesting because that lens is a Russian vintage lens. It was made decades ago. I bought it for $50 off eBay. You can actually find them really well. It's called the Helios 44M4, and it's well known for making that kind of swirly bokeh effect. So if I had used a technically better lens, which the previous picture was taken on, it wouldn't have created that effect. You can see some of the edges, especially in the top left-hand corner. It's starting to swirl in that circle, and that is one of the reasons why I just love that lens so much. And this is actually a behind the scenes. This is a composite of 2 images. So the first image was just the beer pouring into the glass, and the second image was from all that foam had come down.
Nice.
So in Photoshop, I just kind of merged those two. I thought it looked a little bit better with the waterfall of the foam, a little bit more interesting, but that one turned out really well.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's take a look at another one here. This one's really great with the sunset in the background. Kind of, obviously, you can't set up a sunset. If we all could that, we'd all be making Instagram photos left and right. But talk us a little about this one here and how you're able to capture that moment.
Yeah. So one of the challenges with sunset photos is the sunset, you may not realize from your eye, because our eye does a really great job of showing us the dynamic range, but the sunset can be really blown out where it's too white where you can't see anything. And if you expose for the cans, it would be too dark. Actually, I said that backwards. If you expose for the cans, the sunset is blown out. If you expose for the sunset, the cans would be too dark. So what I ended up doing with this is I used a reflector. It was just a silver reflector that I have, and it bounces light back towards the cans. And then with a little bit of editing and post, this really cool picture turned out. And that one was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Awesome. Those are great. Some photos here. If you joined us late, we're talking to Paul Shim, who's a beer photographer. We're talking all things about taking the best pictures possible for your check-in on Untapped or whatever you'd like to put the photo, but I'm going to say Untapped here. If you have questions for Paul, you want to ask about beer photography or anything else, use the platform on yours, Twitter, Facebook, or wherever you're watching this, YouTube, and be able to answer them. And we'll throw them on the screen if we can. So kind of going off into a little bit of learning from some of your shots here. If somebody wanted to get into photography with beer, what tips would you give them into terms of trying to figure out the first step from an entry-level perspective?
One of the hardest things I would say about photography, and one thing that I always am trying to learn, is to find the best quality light. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and spend money on a light, but just finding a quality natural light is a big thing. Probably 95% of my photos are just natural light, as in the sun, and being able to manipulate that with a reflector or a diffuser, or just knowing the time of day to shoot, right? So most of my pictures, you'll notice that they're not shot at night, because I try not to use the incandescent bulbs in my house. I usually don't shoot during midday. I mean, I can, but it has a much harsher effect in the shadows and in the highlights. So I just try to find the best quality light. That could be light pouring into a window, right? If you have curtains, the curtains will diffuse that sunlight and it will be just beautiful soft light. It could be an overcast day. Overcasts are our wedding photographers love going to weddings with an overcast day, because everything is just so even and there's no harsh highlights and there's no really deep shadows in that. So besides the technical aspects of learning like shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, which I could go on and about, I don't know how nerdy you want to get here though. Just trying to master light and find the best light possible would be my number one thing to work on. And that's a hard thing to do, granted, but
right.
I think if you master that, then you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I mean, Paul and I were talking before the show. I recently got myself into photography and just starting to break the boundaries there in terms of that. Now, obviously, with we have all these fancy cameras, these DSLRs, but obviously you can take some really great photos with your iPhone or Android, depending on what version you're in. Do you have any tips for people to start to use their iPhones, different settings that they can use to get the maximum exposure on some of these newer iPhones and Androids?
Absolutely. So it's funny because there's a big discussion in the photography world about how good smart HDR phones are getting. Like your iPhone could probably put out a better dynamically ranged photo, if that's a term, a better photo in terms of dynamic range than a mirrorless camera can, because of the chipset in a smartphone can just process through that. So it can take down those highlights and boost those shadows without having to do much. But I would say maybe this is just a pet peeve of mine, and Greg, you can weigh in on this. Using like the portrait modes of phones, I tend to stay away from, because especially with bottles or stemmed glasses or even regular glasses, like it will just chop off the top of the glass thinking that there's nothing there.
Yep.
And that's kind of a pet peeve for me. So what I would suggest is just forget about the portrait mode, go for a regular shot. Try to find a really cool camera app that might shoot in RAW, because editing and post-production will go wonders. It will do a lot. And really, I would say most of the magic that happens for my photos, I think, is in post.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember taking a lot of photos, and I'm sure you're out there, you guys listening, when we take photos with our new iPhones and have the portrait mode, like a picture like this is going to frost up the top of the glass. It's not going to show anything at all. So I definitely agree with you, Paul. I would stay away from portrait mode and focus on getting high resolution. If you have the HDR option in your phone, your camera, to take those, and then use something like Lightroom, which is a free product sometimes for 30-day trials and things of that nature, to edit your photos there. It makes a huge difference when posting on it. You can also export those photos right to your camera roll and then use them on your Untapped check-in. And it's really great to kind of do that. I do it all the time, where I'll take a photo with my iPhone, and then I'll be exporting it into Lightroom and then put it right back into the check-in. So you don't have to carry around dongles for cameras and things of that nature. You can get it all done from that perspective there on that front. So that's a really cool tip from that side. If you join us late, we're talking to Paul Shim, who is the beer photographer, and we're talking all things beer photography. Amazing bokeh on the back of your shots in Untapped, obviously. Where else would you put it? Maybe Instagram, but this is a show about Untapped, so we're going to stick to that. And so if you have any questions for Paul about what you want to use with your photography, make sure you add it in your chat on your network, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and we'll probably get a chance to show it up here. So one of the cool things about Untapped, obviously, with photography, is when we first created Untapped, beer photos were not part of that. And wasn't even an inkling in my imagination when developing this that anybody would want to take a picture of beer. But fast forward to where we are 10 years later, it's everywhere. And how do you explain the kind of explosion in this area? Is it because of Instagram coming into the fray? Is it something else that's made beer photography such an important part, not just for the consumer, but also Brewery is spending a lot of time, effort, and putting those things on Instagram as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is partly because of smartphones, right? Because now everybody has the ability to take a picture and then post it instantly, right? I mean, just the amount of time it takes you to open the app and then post it, it's there. But I remember your second part of the question, but I have a question for you, Greg.
Yeah, sure.
Talking about, like, you didn't have the idea of even posting pictures to Untap. Like, when did that sort of be part of your discussion?
I think, when we first started Untapped, we were a web app, and there wasn't a good way for us to use the camera on the web version of it. So there wasn't an inkling of ability to support that. Now, of course, you have a lot of those things available from the very get-go. But as we moved to a native application a couple of years down the road, that was what we added. But, to my like defense here, like, I didn't even think people would want to take pictures of their photo. I thought it was something every other app was doing out there, Paul. So I figured, hey, we'll just add it in there because everyone else was doing it, right? And no intention of these elaborate pictures that we see on a regular basis to come out of it. So, but yeah, it was something that we tried to push into there, and we only got into it. And I think, taking a look at the numbers, we're close to like, I don't know, 300, 400 million photos that have been added to these check-ins from the very beginning. So it's pretty crazy to see the growth of that all throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, and I think beer photography for breweries is massive right now. I mean, honestly, one of the best Instagrams, or any social media for that matter, is Allagash, and anything they post is beautiful, and it just makes you want that beer no matter where you are in the country. Most likely, I can't get that beer in upstate New York. I can only get, the flagship Allagash beers. But I think just the fact that it's so accessible to most people, and they can see it, and then they can immediately either go buy it or look out for it or things like that. And I think the photography game plays a big role in that.
Absolutely. Let's go to the chat for a question for Paul. This one's from Tom Chesney, and he says, "How do I take pictures of barrel-aged beers or other super dark beers that still show a bit of the caramel tones?"
That's an interesting question. So, if I were to try to take a picture of a stout or something like that, I would just make sure that there is plenty of light. And even this is another trick that a lot of people do is shine a light through the beer, so it's facing the camera, right? So
Right.
basically, you would be um, pretend my little fist here is the light. I don't know if you can see this, but I
Yeah.
would be shining a light into the beer so that the camera could see it. And that's a big trick that people do. And just trying to make sure that you supply enough light that will bring out all the colors that you want.
Great question. There's another one here from Tom Sawyer, and it says, "Greg, what percentage of check-ins are accompanied by a photo?" I don't know the exact number on the percentage there, but we have over 300 million photos have been added to check-ins, and we have close to 900 million check-ins overall. So again, adding in the math here that has all this information here of when we added the photo and it featured to the app. We see a lot of them. I mean, you look at your activity feed on Untapped check-in, you probably see a bunch of photos already being added to check-ins itself. I over time have gotten really used to taking a photo with my DSLR camera, incorporating it into Lightroom, editing out. Maybe I'm a little bit anal when it comes to putting all this stuff together, and I want to make it perfect. But I've definitely seen a big rise in just photos from just a point and click from the old iPhone 4s to iPhone 11 Pros, seeing these amazing color palettes on there when it comes to it. So it's great to see a lot of people posting photos on there. I know you do it a lot, Paul, with your check-ins as well. I always get laughed at personally by my family while I'm setting up a picture on a road or something like that. I'm sitting down, I'm taking my picture there. There's got to be times, Paul, if you've had the same thing where you're out at a restaurant and people are like, "What is that guy doing?" Any cool stories on that front?
Not one that comes to mind, but I definitely know that feeling. And it's interesting because like I plan it out in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring my beer over to that table, and 5 people are gonna see me like doing this. But you just got to do it. Like if it looks cool, then it doesn't really matter.
For me, for my tip to people is always carry your camera around. I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is there's going to be moments that you want to take when you're at a brewery and maybe you don't think about bringing your camera to begin with, but forcing yourself to bring your camera with you will make you take pictures over and over again. And it just makes it for a better experience and learning a lot from the process itself. And I see Tom Chesney that love the lightning idea. Thank you. So you got a tip there from the one and only Paul. So you're good to go on that front. So, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of talk about, some of the stuff that you've done, and now that you moved to Rochester. Talk us a little bit about the beer scene up there. It's funny, when I lived in New York for a long period of time, and I lived in Westchester County, which is right above New York City, and everyone's, "Oh, you live in upstate." And no. Westchester is not upstate. That is just about 30 minutes from the center of Manhattan. Rochester is really upstate. So give us a little picture of exactly what the beer scene looks like up there with all the breweries that are popping up.
So I am blown away by the Rochester beer scene, but before I get into that, I will share a funny story with you. About 2 weeks ago, I put an Instagram poll up on my Instagram story, and I said, "Do you consider Rochester upstate or Western New York?" Right? Coming from Connecticut.
Yeah.
Coming from Connecticut, I thought everything north of New York City was upstate. I didn't even know Western was a term, but Instagram was split 50-50. It was very close between Western and upstate. Anyways, yeah, the Rochester beer scene honestly is great. You're never short on great beer. Like this Rohrbach, they're an excellent example of a small to medium brewery just pumping out fantastic beer, really solid. And everybody that I've met is just the nicest type of beer drinker. Sometimes you can get those sort of mean or aggressive beer drinkers, but not in Rochester. Everybody's so nice to each other. Everybody looks out for each other. And there are some really fantastic breweries.
What's your favorite up there that you've kind of been surprised about? Obviously, coming from Connecticut, where I live, you've obviously known the scene very well. What was kind of your expectations going to a new area? I think that's probably a question that people have as they navigate to a brand new area and the beers that pop up there. What were your expectations going into that?
I actually had pretty high expectations going in just because my
Mhm.
wife is from Rochester and we've been traveling back and forth for a number of
Mhm.
years now. So I kind of knew what I was expecting. But Fifth Frame is one of my favorite breweries up here in Rochester. They do some great hazy IPAs and some really clean lagers, which I'm really into. Mortalis is another big brewery up here that's been making waves. They do a pretty well-known Hydra. It's a fruited sour. They have a huge series about that. And they have lines for days in their
Oh,
drive-through
geez.
setup. So yeah, they're doing
Very
really
cool.
well.
Obviously, you've been in Rochester for a little while, but if someone was visiting, I know right now, obviously, COVID, we don't do much of that. What would be your top pick for a place to visit in terms of a brewery or a bar that you kind of experience in terms of a place you got to see?
Ooh, great question. Now that Other Half is here, I would say check out Other Half.
Hmm.
That's definitely on the list. A great beer bar is Tap and Mallet. They have
Yep.
tons of great beer. They have do tons of releases. One of the festivals they used to do back before all this happened was they basically would close down the street on Gregory Street and they would just hold a big beer festival, and Tap 'em Out was just sort of central to that. So that's a really great beer bar. Honestly, you could throw a stone and hit a good brewery here. And
Awesome.
just the Finger Lakes region in general is swimming with great breweries and wineries, and it is a really great area.
Awesome. Well, also tap them out as an untapped business customer, so you can see all their menus on the app, which is great to see. So next time you're up there, obviously we talked about COVID being a crazy time for everything going on there. How is it? From a perspective of not being able to go out as much, how has it affected your overall taking pictures and kind of engaging that? You find yourself taking a lot at home now as opposed to when you're going out. What's kind of your mindset when it comes to COVID and photography?
So I feel like my photography has undergone a cabin fever, just like everybody else,
Right.
because I sort of did rely on traveling to different breweries and being able to post about that and get new pictures like that. And I feel like there's only so many angles I can create in my own house. Maybe that's a challenge for me that I should work through and I probably will learn a lot from. But yeah, I definitely feel it as a photographer, just knowing that my patio outside is only so big. I can only do so many angles. But I think I've been making it work somehow, hopefully.
I'm actually the same way, believe it or not. I'm pretty sure that my deck has been in like 90% of my photos over the last 3 months, and just something that I'm with you. You kind of find it hard. What I do normally is trying to find areas of my lawn or yard or something like that I can incorporate some of the things. But for people watching out there, you don't have to actually go to a brewery to take some amazing shots. I think a lot of the cool things is in nature with beer as well. So I think that's an opportunity to kind of test your skills out there and show us your amazing photos. Speaking of which, if you joined us late, we are trying to get a contest going here to see if we can have the best photos posted out there. So basically, go ahead and check in your beer on tap and make sure you tag the check-in game strong as your hashtag and share that out to your social networks. And we're going to post the best ones on Instagram and other networks out there. So try to beat Paul. You've already seen his amazing photos we appear here. I'm putting him on the spot here and see what we can get. We'd love to see what you can do out there. Ultimately, one of the things that you created, I've noticed, is this nystate.beer website, which is a list of all the New York State breweries there. Talk us through why you created this and what it's been used for on your side.
Yeah, so I created nystate.beer, and it's a website for you can go to where it will list all the breweries that can ship within New York State due to the new regulations because of the pandemic.
Right.
I was actually inspired by a website called supportrockeats.com. It's a very similar thing, but it's based off of restaurants. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I can't find a list of breweries shipping with New York State. So why not just make it yourself or myself? So I created this website. You can search for any brewery. There are lots of breweries there. There are some really incredible breweries. One of the first places that I got New York State shipping from was Suarez Family Brewery.
A great brewery.
Yeah, fantastic. Never in my life did I think I could get a case of Suarez lagers and pilsners delivered right to my door. And I was obsessed with it, right? I was like so excited that I could have all this beer shipped straight to me, so that I created nystate.beer. And again, it's just a resource for people to support local or to support their state brewery. And Greg, I have a question for you. I don't know how similar app development is to web development, but there is like awkward spacing and margin issues in the website that I can't seem to fix. So
We'll do it, right. We'll do it live after this call. I guarantee I'll hop on there and we'll get it done. That's your tech support on the Untapped TV line right there. So yeah,
there you go.
I think it's really cool because I think a lot of time, Suarez, if you've never heard of their brewery before, it's a great brewery in Hudson Valley. And when I lived in Rochester County, got them on draft a lot. But to hear you say you deliver it to your doorstep is mind boggling because it's very hard to even find them pre-COVID in the area. So it's pretty cool to see that. I know a lot of the other breweries, even in New York City, are able to ship all the way up to upstate and the whole state of New York as well. Three's Brewing Company, which we had on a few shows ago, does the same thing as well. So obviously with COVID, it's really tough to be able to get product in the hands of people and want to do the safest way as possible. So it's great to see some of the laws and the website to be able to help you kind of find those areas to go and be able to go down there and pick them up and be safe. That's the most important part about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Suarez, they had posted a couple of Instagram stories right when they started New York State shipping, and they sold out like within the first 30 minutes to an hour. So I was like, oh man,
that's crazy.
I got to put this Instagram account on like post notifications. So every time they post about a new shipment, I'm on it right away. I know what they're shipping. If I want to get in, I try to do it as soon as possible. Same thing with Hudson Valley. I mean, they're another great brewery that's offering shipping that sells out really quick. So yeah, I just try to keep that list updated. Again, one of the things I will say is make sure that you check with the brewery itself to see if their policies have changed now that things are progressing slowly, if any.
Right.
Different breweries are making different adjustments to their to the things that they're doing. So I will say, make sure you check with that brewery website and before you order something.
Sounds good. Well, let's go to the comments. We got a few up here. Let's go to Marcelo, who said, beer plus landscape in the background equals horizontal cell. Selfie plus beer equals vertical cell. Am I right? I'm not sure. I always personally, from my perspective, like to take shots in landscape, and I shoot from my perspective in a horizontal when I'm doing something for like Instagram stories or something like that. Because ultimately, I know the secret is that we crop the photo a lot when it comes to in the Untapped world. So if you do it in a horizontal perspective, you get more on the Untapped side from there. But what do you think about that, Paul?
I think Instagram has unfortunately dictated how I take my photos because 95% of my photos are just in portrait, right? That's just the way that Instagram is laid out. If I shoot a portrait photo, I can crop it to 4:5, and it fits perfectly in the Instagram format. I do think a lot of people have made the argument that we as humans see in landscape, right? So yes. Landscape should be the better sort of orientation. But yeah, Instagram, I will say, has definitely dictated that I shoot in portrait. I don't know if I like that, but that's the reality.
Sounds good. Let's go to the next question from Kurt. Kurt says, Paul, I would expect more photos of your walls for being a photographer. Is this someone that you know, perhaps? Or
I don't know, Kurt. No. Honestly, my walls are kind of boring. I don't want to show you my walls. I want to show you the cool bokeh that I can get.
Exactly. I like it. Very cool. I have one from Tom Sawyer as well. As that, during COVID times, not much travel. How can you up your check-in photo game when you're in the same space and the same glassware? I think this is an interesting perspective, Paul. I'm interesting to hear what you have to say about it. But for me, like I said earlier, I try to find pictures in the weirdest spots. So I was at the beach last weekend. So I found there was a large log that was brushed up against the rub there, and put a can at the very end of it. And then it's pretty cool. So I find it when you don't really expect it, there's something there that you may not have thought would be good for that photo, but putting a beer there accidentally kind of creates a photo. What do you think about that, Paul?
I agree. And I saw that picture, and that one turned out really well. I think that our eyes see so much more of the world than our actual camera does. So sometimes I'll just take a corner of a table, get very close in terms of proximity, and crop out everything else. And if the light is good, right, if I edit it in post to make it look really cool, then that's enough. I don't think that it has to be some, groundbreaking, talking about sunsets before. I don't think it has to be this beautiful sunset every time. I think if the lighting is good, if you edit it correctly, if it's in focus, right, it has to be in focus.
Yes,
if it's in focus, then then it's good, right? I mean, I don't think it has to be something amazing to do. I think you just have to pick and choose your little areas in your own home, which I'm trying to do as well.
Exactly. Let's go. Another question from Craft Beer Junkie, a little bit away from the photography stuff. What's your favorite style, Paul? Are you struggling with true New England style IPAs like I am?
My favorite style is sort of the wild ale style. So the
Mhm.
cool ship, barrel aged on fruit or anything like that. I'm super into. I think there is a really interesting characteristic about how local beer can get if it is a cool ship beer. So
Mhm.
Allagash is a good example. Like they'll use main ingredients and they'll put it on to their cool ship and just let it ferment from wild. And I think that is a really interesting characteristic. A brewery that does it really well up here is Pantomime Mixtures. I think they're based out of Hector, New York, but don't quote me on that. But they do a lot of similar things, and it's just amazing what they can put out like that. So I would say that I tend to gravitate towards those
Mhm.
more than anything else.
Yeah, for me, I've said it on the show numerous times here. I love New England IPAs like anybody else does, but I've really been gravitating a lot back to the lagers and pilsners. I feel like in the summer months, those are great beers. Plus, from a photographer perspective, they're clear and you can see through them, so you can create some great effects when you look through the actual lens of your camera into the glass itself, especially with kind of backgrounds from greens and things of that nature. With a beer like this, you're not seeing anything through it. So you get not a lot of light that comes through that. And also it makes for interesting perspectives from that side. So that's something that I've been really looking into on that side here. Very cool. One of the things that I've always been interesting about some of the stuff that you do is I always see a lot of post-production for a lot of the stuff that you do. How important it is, if you're a novice a person getting into photo, is it important to go through an editor to kind of even tune your style? I think people get a lot of thrown away sometimes with like, oh, Photoshop, that's complicated, or Lightroom, that's complicated. Personally, I don't think it's that complicated, but I've been using it for a long time. What's the kind of perception you're on of post-production? Does it really make that much of a difference for people looking at their photos?
I really do think it makes a huge difference. Honestly, if you're just using a phone for your photography, one of the biggest suggestions, excuse me, that I would make to you is find an app that can shoot RAW. If you're on an
Mm-hmm.
iPhone, the native camera app does not shoot RAW. So find
Mm-hmm.
an app that can shoot RAW and then just dabble in Lightroom, right? Most of the settings are pretty intuitive.
Right.
Contrast, highlights, shadows, right? If you move those sliders back and forth, you know what they're going to do. Saturation, clarity, if you want it to be a little bit sharper, but don't go too far.
Yeah.
And just play around. And the cool thing is there's no right or wrong, right? If
Right.
you think that it looks good, if you think it's pleasing, the edits, that's awesome. And just keep it, export it, and post it to Untapped. And the best thing about Lightroom is it's non-destructive. So you can literally go back to square one. If you
Mm-hmm.
totally messed up your image, click the reset button, try again. Like, not a big deal. But I think it makes a huge difference just to put in that little effort for post-production.
Yeah, they also have an auto button in Lightroom too, so you can easily just hit that auto button and it could lighten up to your standards if you think that's good enough from that perspective. Speaking about editing photos, obviously one of the crazy things about of shooting is the environment that you're in. And this has been a question I've seen a couple times come through the chat here, and one I want to ask you, Paul. What's the most interesting place you have taken a beer photo? I've done some crazy stuff from a road to a ledge of a cliff, but what about you in terms of your craziest spot you had a photo taken?
I definitely can agree with you with the cliff. I was
Mm.
at Shenandoah National Park a couple of
Yep.
years ago, and we went up to the top, and I brought a sequence with me and just photo. We won't drink it up at the top because I feel like that'd be a little responsible. We just got a photo opportunity. That's probably the highest altitude I've ever been in. I don't think I have like really crazy environments that I work in. Maybe my wife would think differently, but I feel like for the most part, I'm more concerned about the sharpness,
Yep.
the clarity of it, having it in focus, the lighting is good, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key thing to take away, if you want to take anything with the conversation about light, light is probably the most important part of your photography journey when it comes to beer, especially when you're kind of capturing those darker beers, like you mentioned earlier, Paul, about shining a light through it. That's really important. I find myself trying to take pictures in bars pre-COVID, it's pretty impossible to get good lighting in a bar from that perspective. So always try to capture that light in a different way within your camera, whether you're using your iPhone or whether you're using your Android or a professional camera. You'll be able to get the best picture with the most amount of light coming from there. There's a question that just came in here from John Gross asking about Lightroom versus Instagram filters. This is a great question because, in the pre-days of Instagram, it was like filter on everything. Every photo was filtered, and it was like, oh my God, it's amazing. But talk to us a little about why the presets in Lightroom or the Lightroom experience is very different than what it is from Instagram filters.
Yeah, great question. Lightroom will just give you a little bit more control about what you want to do. So let's say that you want to manipulate a photo, and let's just say you want to make it warmer. You want to make the reds and the yellows of the sun a little bit more saturated. You want just the overall temperature of the photo to be warmer. You can specifically do that in Lightroom. With an Instagram filter, it's just whatever they've decided for you. So right. I would say that, a cool thing might be to do is, maybe I'll try this myself, is get a photo and put an Instagram filter on it, and then try to do that in Lightroom to see exactly what's happening. Maybe that's too nerdy. Maybe that's something that I'd be into. But I would say that the Instagram filters, they work for most photos, but they don't work for all photos. And I think that's where people get a little bit caught up, is because they take a photo with a certain character of light in it, or the light is positioned a different way, and that filter works for this. It's amazing for that photo, but for this next photo where the light is in a different position, or there's not as much light, maybe the filter doesn't work as well. And Lightroom will just be able to give you those finer controls about what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we focus on with Untapped is you want to enjoy the experience you're in too. So you don't obviously have to tweak all these settings while you're out at a bar. Maybe that's not happening anyways because you're staying at home with COVID. But for the most part, Lightroom gives you a great opportunity to hit that auto button and then see where you can tweak. When I was first learning Lightroom, the first thing I did was hit that auto button, and then I tweak the light, I said exposure, trying to feel what I can do with it. It gives you kind of a great way to kind of experience it in a different way. And ultimately, this is not a commercial for Adobe or anything like that, but I definitely think Lightroom is a much better choice if you want to get into creating amazing pictures. Now, there's a lot of chatter I'm seeing in the chat about, I've never edited a photo beyond cropping. I think that is an important part of the photo experience too. And, positioning your beer in a way in the photo from a cropping perspective is interesting because different perspectives give you a different look on that particular photo. So while you don't think you're editing your photo by cropping a photo, you're pretty much editing it to the minimalist degree. Take that next step and try to get some interesting perspective. Change the light filter. If you have a black and white, I think that's also another opportunity to explore these things out here when it comes to beer photography.
I will say too that nowadays native camera apps on phones, like the iPhone camera app, the native app, it will let you change a lot of the adjustments that Lightroom has, right? So if you click edit on an iPhone, and at the bottom there's all these dials and controls, just go through and poke around and see what you like, see what you don't like, and come up with a style from there. So it doesn't even have to be Lightroom. If you're intimidated by that app or that program, just do it in the camera app and see what you can come up with.
Yeah, it's really interesting and really cool stuff from that perspective here. I think it's a great comment here from Tech Photo Guy. So Instagram filters and edits are great for when you want to spend 30 seconds on an image. Lightroom is great for when you want to spend 5 minutes on a photo. I mean, I would agree to some aspect there as well. Instagram filters are kind of built for like in the moment situations. We have a photo editor that's in Untapped as well. It does very similar things to Instagram and different dials from that perspective. But if you want to really kind of fine tune your photo to the best degree, Lightroom has a lot of options for you to play from when it comes to those things. So we'll go to one last question here from Craig. And Craig says, what beer was used in your favorite beer photo? So first we have to ask you your favorite beer photo, and then we'll ask you what the beer is in that favorite beer photo.
All right, so this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but I don't think I have a favorite beer photo.
That's the cop-out answer.
Is it kind of like your kids? Like you don't have a favorite kid, so I don't have a favorite photo.
I think from my perspective, some of the stuff I love from you and the stuff that you've been able to do, it's been able to encompass a scene or extreme bokeh or pouring over the beer. I think something that really enlightening to me is the foam picture we shared earlier, and I'll throw that back up on the screen.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a really good one we did post-production here. This is really, really cool because it captures the moment of the beer pouring into the can and have it flowing over. That's kind of what you see in like movies out there in a sense. But this is what I like from some of the stuff that you've done. I think this is really captures the essence of photography when it comes to beer.
Yeah, that one did end up really well. Again, the lighting was really great. I did do post-production work more than I'm used to because I had to composite 2 images for that. But that was jalapeno cream ale from K2 Brewing, which I'm apparently really into, like peppered cream ales. I didn't know that before, but that was delicious.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I want to appreciate all the time you've given us and all the tips and tricks on how to take the best beer photos. In case you missed it here, if you're watching tonight and you're checking your beer, take a photo of that beer. Try to add some cool things to it and add the hashtag check-in. Check-in game is strong to your check-in, and we'll post it to your social accounts. We'll try to retweet some of the awesome ones that we see. Your goal is to beat Paul in his photo game there. So you got your pictures, you know what you're going after. Make sure you check them there. So thank you so much, Paul. I want to give you an opportunity to say where people can find you on Instagram or anything that you want to give a shout out to before we close tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg. Again, I'm just thrilled to be here. You can find me on any social media platform at Beers with Shim. A lot of people call me Beers with Him, but it's Beers with Shim.
I will. First time I met you, I thought it was Beers with Him, but that's fine. I got it now.
Totally okay. That happens 100% of the time. Again, if you want to support New York State breweries, go to nystate.beer. Just list all the breweries that currently ship within the state.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. We appreciate all your insights, and make sure you use those tips out there on your iPhone and Android if you want to take your first steps to being the best beer photographer. Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for watching tonight on our Tuesday virtual happy hour edition. Want to give you a few updates on what's happening this week on virtual happy hour. On Thursday, we're going to be having Jeremy Danner, who coming in from the Four Hands Brewery in Kansas City. He is world famous, even though his tweet today told me he wasn't. He's world famous. We're talking to him all about Kansas City Brewery and some of the stuff he's done in the past with Boulevard. Then next Tuesday, we're going to have a special guest, Tara Noonan, who's a Forbes beer writer for Philadelphia, one of my favorite beer towns out there. Shout out to Philadelphia. We'll be talking a lot about the beer she's been seeing with COVID in Philadelphia and some of her hot tips on the best beers from the area there. So make sure you tune in. If you have any feedback about Untapped TV or any of the shows we do, let us know at Media on Untapped. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to continue to check in at your Untapped at home. It's a great spot for it. And then finally, if you don't want to listen to the video of me talking to you and seeing my ugly face on your screen, we have all of our videos on podcast as well. Check out untapped.tv for all the information. And where you ever listen to podcasts, you can do that. Until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you on Thursday. Cheers.